that, again, I think we're talking about cabinet report cards. Where has the accountability been? We see the SABC were walking out of Parliament yesterday. So, we're talking about, trying to hold, government accountable through the media. But is the accountability mechanism really in place for an institution like the SABC? What about the minister? We speak so much about Claudia. What about the minister as well? Surely she has to, cup some of the blame here as well.
Questions, by the way, we'll take. Prof, just talk about that, because it goes further than the SABC. I suppose it's easy for us to talk about it, but just recently, PRASA was in Parliament, and they said the systems have collapsed, and that is why they ended up with the 14.5 billion whatever expenditure. So the reality is that actually it's right across the board.
This year, it is hard to do cabinet assessment scores, guys, without looking at all these entities that are managed by the ministers or under supervision of the ministers and have gone haywire. A few years ago, they were projected as the future engines of growth for South Africa out of the 2008 debacle. But they have gone nowhere. They have collapsed. They were supposed to have been creating jobs, to be driving economic growth. That has just not happened. And beyond that, they have collapsed to the extent that they're pulling the economy down further with them. So that is one of the tragedies. And the ministers, SABC, Faith Mutambi, there's a particularly close working relationship between her and the Claudis and the Magubes. And she is absolutely in disregard of Parliament and of her cabinet colleagues. And in other words, there's only one other point of accountability, and that is the president with a Z score. And so yes, and that is probably a tragedy of the year, that so many of these entities have not just collapsed, not fulfilled the expectations associated, but have actually been pulling the economy and the country down with them, and have further generated fears of further capture and what might be possible, while the in-group of power holders, while they have got a reprieve, and the NEC gave them a reprieve a week ago, they remain in that position of state power where they can continue these projects. We see the nuclear issues going up and flying, and there is nothing stopping it. And not the ministers, not the cabinet, not the parliament, and because this has got, that's one point where the ultimate accountability still rests, and that could have been changed last week, but it just wasn't the necessary tipping of the balance to get that change.
Khadija, do you rate Parliament and the Speaker?
We don't. I mean, these are cabinet reports.
Okay, sorry.
Looking at the cabinet, but I think, something that we're actually discussing in the newsroom is actually, broadening this exercise, even looking at, for example, our Chapter 9 institutions, and paying the same scrutiny to them.
And the reason why Angela was asking that question is because Parliament is also another story, and we may obviously disagree on whether the SABC was on track at one point or not, but it's clear that Parliament, at least after '94, was on track. You had very capable members of Parliament, and they, working hard, etc., etc. But that is not allowed in Parliament.
I'm very careful about nostalgia.
Yeah.
For myself, principally. I came to adulthood. My first job was in 1994. I really tried very hard to resist the narrative of, oh, it was better then. Because I remember it being calmer. But to go back to those Chapter 9 institutions and the oversight, we heard from the Auditor General a few weeks ago that there is very little teeth by way of the organization's ability to hold punitive measures, to institute punitive measures on people who simply year after year don't follow the rules. They don't submit paperwork. It's almost impossible for the Auditor General to do anything. This is the year in which the Constitutional Court, in fact, it's a year on from which Mogoeng reminds the executive arm of government that the sort of chief body that interprets the Constitution and interprets the constitutionality of anything in this country is the Constitutional Court.
Yep.
Right? That's after the Omar al-Bashir issue. In this year, that court delivers a judgment finding the two other arms of government inconsistent with the Constitution, the founding law of the country. Now that should alert people to a looming constitutional crisis, because if the legislative arm, which is supposed to hold the executive in check, is in violation of the Constitution, that the executive violated in that point, and you can phrase it in all sorts of ways, inconsistency with the Constitution is violated. That tells you that two-thirds gone. The public protector's recommendations are affirmed as binding. But this is the year in which the Human Rights Commission comes back and says that a particular traditional leader's remarks were not, in fact, hate speech. And there's a very complicated set of circumstances around which that particular judgment comes to be arrived at. So we have the mechanisms and the architecture designed in the lead up to 1994 for the hopefulness of those first 4 years. And those first 4 years had spectacular failures as well, up until about 98, 99. We then assume that at no point would the governing party, whatever they were, get to the position that they're in, because we were told by the president himself, we're not like other Africans generally. And this fed into a South African understanding that this will not happen to us. Our governing party will not start ignoring the very laws they promulgated. But that is precisely what happens in that courtroom when a lawyer for the state says, I don't know where Omar al-Bashir is. How do you lose a head of state at a major continental symposium that you are hosting? This is a security violation. But we were there earlier. We had a Minister of State Security whose wife turned out to have been a drug smuggler. We have now a Minister of State Security whose own security arrangements leave much to be desired. So this idea that we are exceptional is precisely what has driven this idea that we would never have gotten here. So we never go back and go, how did we get here? Because we didn't jump into this pool at the deep end. We waded in step by step over a 20-year period of continuous exceptions, which is why I'm very resistant to nostalgia narratives.
So, gee, all right. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen here, if you listen a bit, what's the general? The frustration which he went through.
Yeah.
You listen to the treasure, the frustration which they went through. The fight between the SARS doesn't know who's the boss. The boss, whether it's treasure or what. And that should possibly tell us something as the voter, as the boss. Boss, we as the voters. We should say, based on this frustration which I went through, these are the key people. Anything economically which went through, even the governor
Of the Reserve Bank.
Reserve Bank, those are key for the country. Once we follow those people, till now, we and you, as the boss, should we wait another 22 years again? Can't you such a bull to the house? Because it's where things are happening before Parliament. Get out, Mr. President. We. Because otherwise we're still going to be wasted time at the reporter, at Irene. What did you get? Nothing. We, you and I, it's a hard time. County and Warren, you and I, we don't want to do we have people in the parliament? They're credible ministers. We have government, leadership. There's no vision. All what they do is looting.
Yeah.
You want them wait for loot for them again. Someone maybe he was caught.
Yeah.
Why should you wait for this? Come on.
Let me understand. Are you recruiting political analysts
No, what I'm saying is, I mean,
in the media?
I'm saying, I mean, yeah, those are some, I mean, those
No,
are
I just
key
want to understand, are you saying the media and political analysts should assist in regime change?